Now, Nigeria has not quite recovered from the surge in May inflation rate of 17.71%, and now this increased to 18.6% according to the recently released CPI report for the month of June 2022 by the NBS. Did you see this coming?
Of course, I mean, we saw this coming because a lot of events have unfolded during the year, and from the global beat to the regional and the national beat. From the global beat, you have the Russia-Ukraine war, geopolitics, as well as the climate change narrative, and also recent lockdowns in China and all that. So all of these geopolitics and all the narratives involved have sort of hampered or broken down supply chains, and that has led to an increase in commodity prices, also further leading to increase in energy and food prices. And we factor that in within the context of some form of high importation from the Nigerian economy. We've seen a lot of imported inflation as well. Also with the fact that the Nigerian economy has been on a vulnerable bit in responding to how global politics has impacted the global economy. So that also coupled with the fact there's been a lot of local conversations around fuel scarcity, breaking down of the national grid, and all of that. It has hampered heavily on movement of goods and services, and that has a way of increasing food prices and the likes, primarily because logistics are hampered on the value chain. Yeah.
But according to the
expected.
Yes, according to the report, it's the highest level in 65 months, that's over 5 years, and the 5th consecutive monthly rise. The last time this happened was in January 2017, when it stood at 18.72%, which represented an increase of 0.17%. It looks like history is repeating itself because, of course, this isn't the first time this will be happening. But could it have been prevented?
Of course, it could have been prevented. Nigeria and the culture of how Africa runs its economics do not really learn from the past. I mean, it's also a global phenomenon as well, but it's sort of much more deepened or tilted, forward down the spectrum when you look at it from the Nigerian economic bit. So we don't learn from our past experiences. We've been through this route before, and if you notice, the inflationary growth is increasing at a faster pace than what it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And that's because there are more collective pressure on prices, commodity prices globally, and it's filtering down into the Nigerian economy. So yes, it could have been avoided. It could have been avoided if the right fiscal measures, structural balancing, and properly monetary regulations were in place. All right, when the times were really good and all that, such that you're positioning the economy to absorb and manage or pace, right, the rate of shocks from the global economy. But we don't have that right now, and at the moment you're exposed to anything that happens. So it's quite an unfortunate situation.
Well, the urban inflation rate increased to 19.09% year on year, and this is 0.74 percentage points higher than the 18.35 recorded in June 2021. And of course, we also see the rural inflation rate increasing to 18.13% in June 2022 from 17.16% recorded in the corresponding period of 2021. The disparity between the rural and urban inflation rates seem to be quite conspicuous. What lesson can we learn from here?
Well, to start with, the Nigerian inflation rates or inflation dynamics is way more deeper than what we are currently seeing. And that's because we've not been able to properly review the inflationary basket. But then you expect that inequality, economics, and all of those things would also impact on how price and increase in food prices permeates through both in rural and urban economy.
Sorry, Gospel, are you saying, are you implying that these figures are not even a true reflection of the inflation the country is currently experiencing?
I'm not saying it's not a true reflection. I'm saying that by methodology, it's undervaluing, all right, the current inflation rate. So if Nigeria really, really wants to know what our inflation rate is, then we need to review the inflationary basket. So the figures are not lying. The figures are underestimating what the real inflation value should be. I'm just speaking to the fact that the impact is much more deeper than we think.
Than the figures.
And so when you see the spread on the rural and urban side, it's just taking shape, and it's showing us patterns to what we could probably get a clearer picture of if a review of the basket is possible.
Well, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we see crude oil prices going up about $100 in the past 6 months. And of course, this has led to an increase in diesel prices, which has almost tripled from the average price of 239 naira to over 600 naira in the same month this year. While Nigeria's petrol subsidy payments have totaled 947.5 billion naira, and more than half of 2021 subsidy spending, which was 1.5 trillion naira, petroleum products marketers under the aegis of MOMAN had advised the government to end the subsidy regime by adopting a gradual removal approach to ease the pressure of subsidy spending on the government. What are your thoughts on this? It's not just MOMAN calling for this gradual removal. We've also seen the IMF also advise the federal government in this regard. What do you make of it?
I actually didn't get the question. Can you take it again, please?
Yes, looking at the cost of diesel and the fact that the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war has affected the price of fuel in the country. The Association of Major Oil Marketers have talked that moment. They've advised the federal government to end the subsidy regime by adopting a gradual removal approach. And they're not just the only ones. IMF has also called on this gradual removal. Do you pitch your tent with this thoughts?
Well, the gradual removal, it's actually what is advised, because an outright removal would cause more damage than good. But however, the idea of the removal is to allow for fuel prices to interact with market prices. So meaning that supply demand side would meet, and they'll probably find, in quotes, an equilibrium price. But that's also a function of if your supply side is properly it's really in view, in a sense, because when you look at it from demand angle, there's a lot of demand for fuel right now in Nigeria, but the supply side is broken down and questioned by several value chain conversations, from Europe and the likes. And Nigeria also exports raw material, crude oil, and all of that. So the truth is that we need to fuel subsidy has to be taken out, gradually as we go on, but it is not the most sustainable solution. The focus from Nigerians, analysts, and the likes, or IMF, in fact, has been on removing fuel subsidy. But I think that the focus should be fixing other alternatives, energy alternatives like power and all that. And that's because a critical chunk of those who buy fuel on a month-to-month are actually Nigerians, who run household generators and all of that. You have less of that's the bulk of the market who patronizes PMS purchase every month. So now, if you think of fixing power and fixing the local refineries, you would have taken out the pressure on PMS from that market. It technically means that you would not have any conversation. There won't be any conversation on the table around subsidy any longer, because the drivers for subsidy has been dealt with, which is the unavailability of power, to power households and all that. So the conversion of subsidy is an illusion, in itself. It's a distraction in itself, because the right conversations are not happening, or stakeholders are not held responsible on what is really right, which is fixing power in the first place. So, yes, I agree with you that it needs to be taken out gradually. But the big picture is, even if you take out fuel subsidy right now and you leave it to market prices, the price of fuel will still lead to some form of inflation, and will still shrink Nigerians and Nigerian consumers further.
You already answered my next question, because I was going to ask that as it is now, Nigerians are already paying more for fuel, leading to more inflationary pressure. And of course, this gradual approach of boiling the frog slowly, of course, would further worsen inflationary pressures. But I think you already put that, you already said that. But the IMF has also recently called on the federal government to divert the money spent on subsidy into other sectors, like the health sector and the education sector. Do you buy this idea? Because the other side of it, gospel, is that there's the fear of some people, some individuals enriching themselves with these funds? Gospel. Okay, talking about this issue of petrol subsidy, and of course that's a subset of our focal point, talking about the issue of the food inflation rate, which the CBN just released. Thank you for joining us again, Gospel.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate the time.
Yes. So talking about the advice of the IMF saying that the federal government should divert the money spent on subsidy into other sectors of the economy like health and education. I was asking if you buy this idea, considering the fact that there's the fear of some individuals enriching their pockets with these funds.
So first of all, I mean, we shouldn't be scared of the fact that people would always enrich themselves. I mean, the nature of the human condition is the fact that human beings will always want to take advantage of window opportunities. But the core for me is focusing the energy, the resource, the thinking around fixing power, not just any other sector. Because if you fix power, other sectors can thrive quickly. If you fix power, Nigerians will not have to go to the filling stations any longer. If you fix power, probably won't fix refineries. We'll be much more in control and benefit from the increasing oil prices globally, and whatever fluctuations. We number one, be in control, and number two, we'll be less vulnerable to international oil prices. So where I'm heading at is ensuring that those monies are plowed back in the core of the economy that would drive other sectors, not just investing in other sectors.
Okay.
So you can invest in health right now, but if you don't have power and light is going off when the surgery is happening in the hospitals, it doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense. But let's look at the food inflation figure, which is a closely watched index, rising to 20.6% in June 2022 from 19.5% recorded in May 2022. And of course, this rise was caused by increases in prices of bread, cereals, food products, potatoes, yam, and other tubers, meat, fish, oil, and fat, and wine. This doesn't seem to be abating, especially after the recent Salah celebrations. What do you foresee in the coming days? All right, Gospel there talking to us about the recently released inflation figure, which of course shot up from 17.71% to 18.6%. And of course, we're looking at the factors responsible for this, the impact on the economy, and what the government can do to save the day. Gospel, are you with us now? Okay, we'll try to link back up with Gospel to further the conversation, but we're looking at the advice of the IMF and different organizations as regards subsidy regime, and also talking about the food inflation rate, which also has shot up. Thank you for joining us again, Gospel.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's talk this food inflation increase.
Yeah, so I was saying that it's likely to continue because anytime inflation hits, it pressures more on food. From history, it pressures first on food. Then you want to think of housing, shelters, transportation, education, and the likes. So it's likely that it's going to continue because there are core structural crises that are leading to that cost push, cost push pressure on inflation. And until all of those things are fixed, we may not be able to come to a place where food inflation is on the low and all of that. So it's just a very harsh reality that Nigerians will have to cope with. And maybe at the end of the day, government may have to look for a stimulus to help Nigerians manage the pressure some more. But all of these things are just are not sustainable in the sense, until we fix the structural elements and the variables that influence for cost push inflationary pressure from food. Until we do that successfully, we may not be able to have better days ahead on this conversation.
Let's also review the core inflation, which excludes the prices of volatile agricultural produce, increased to 15.75% in the review month, rising by 0.85 percentage points compared to 14.9% recorded in the previous month. Help us make sense of this. Are we in dire straits here?
So the honest truth about inflation is that once inflation hits on food, the likelihood it will hit on other items is also very high. Because outside the direct impact, there's also what you call indirect impacts. There's also what you call perceived scarcity. When producers and suppliers of other items that are outside food looking at the market, and looking at how raw materials will come in to enable the process of production for other items, you begin to realize that there's some form.
All right, Gospel, they're talking to us about the food inflation rate, and of course, right now we're talking about the core inflation, which it says that there's no isolation to the increase in the inflation rate because it affects every other sector of the economy. And of course, we're looking at that vis-a-vis the report released by the CBN recently about the inflation rate shooting up from 17.71% to 18.6%. Gospel, are you back with us? Okay.
Let me see.
Yes. So let's review the inflation rate by states. In June 2022, all items inflation on a year-on-year basis was highest in Bauchi, which was put at 21.99%. Kogi had 21.37%. Ebonyi had 20.73%, while Adamawa had 16.14%. Sokoto had 16.31%, and Jigawa 16.37%, recorded the slowest rise in headline year-on-year inflation. How do you explain these figures?
Yeah, so first off is to mention that Nigeria is still, a lot of the states in Nigeria are still peasant-based. So it's quite unfair that increase in price would pressure more on the poor than even the rich, but then it shrinks the consumer class as well. Technically, what I would think of as a midterm way around this is to begin to enable and unlock the commercial value of this states until states can be much more commercially viable. They cannot contribute to the production and productive arm of the GDP and economic activities as a whole. So the only way for us to be able to combat inflationary pressure in all these vulnerable states is also position the states and its people to be much more productively involved, all right, in the core value.
Okay, talking about the states, getting the states involved and the activities that can boost revenue. Of course, we know that many of the states are, experiencing one form of insecurity or the other, and that will, of course, affect the level of inflation rate that they would record. Gospel, welcome back. Gospel. Okay. Well, we still are talking about the inflation rate figure recently released by the CBN, talking about the figures jacking up from 17.71% to 18.6%. Gospel, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. Now, all of these issues, the inflation rate, the figures, are further exacerbated by the constant depreciating value of the naira, already trading over 620 naira to a dollar at the parallel market and 425 naira to a dollar at the official window. The purchasing power of the average Nigerian has been further eroded. Is there a silver lining in this dark cloud? We are having some technical issues there, but of course I would fix it and bring this conversation home, talking about how the dollar rate is also exacerbating the whole inflationary pressure in the country. Welcome back, Gospel.
Thank you.
Yes, I was asking, considering the fact that the dollar rate is also at 620 naira to a dollar, that's at the parallel market, and 425 naira to a dollar at the official window. And of course, this is further eroding the purchasing power of the average Nigerian. But is there a silver lining in this dark cloud?
Do you mean, are there positives in this whole narrative?
Yes.
Well, it's hard, actually. It's hard to find one. We just need to do better. That's just what I have to say on that. We just need to do better because the narratives are not encouraging. And Nigerians are at the mercy of this changing dynamic. So until the core structural issues are fixed, we may not be able to have brighter and better days or quote-unquote silver linings around these dark clouds. So to help the process would be to initiate the right drivers or enablers to help Nigerians reach and have better experiences around cost of living and a properly valued currency.
All right. Thank you so much for your thoughts this morning, Gospel Obile. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay, we've been talking about the inflation rate, the latest figures, and we've been speaking with Gospel Obile, who is a macroeconomist.